Here's one for you. I was listening to the Blind Boy podcast. Couldn't recommend his podcast more highly. Fucking great lad. And he had an Irish comedian on, a guy called PJ Gallagher, another very funny Irish comedian, well worth checking out. And dropped a bit of a fucking bombshell just there as I was listening, and I stopped the recording and I had to kind of think about it and kind of tried to process a little bit what they were talking about. But he was, I don't know if committed is the right term, but he spent 11 weeks, and again, I don't know if this is the right term, but in a mental hospital. I must actually look up the actual appropriate term, but we'll use mental hospital. It'll have to suffice for now. So wasn't doing great, got worse. The way he put it, I thought was actually it was well put. He said that he was, now don't quote me on this, but the sentiment will be there. He was living month to month, fucking get over fucking, March, and fucking April might be a little bit better. And then it was week to week, and it was like, oh, fucking, just get this week out of the way, and, fucking, it'll be the weekend, and then next week might be a bit different. And then it was day to day, and then it was, one half of the day to the other half of the day. It was like, I'll make it to lunchtime, and we'll take it from there. And then it was hour to hour, and then minute to minute, and fucking, moment to moment. And I think that's a very good way of articulating how you spiral downwards mentally, or maybe emotionally, or both, or generally, I suppose. It's your time frames shrink to every fucking second, basically. And I just think there's something to that, because I think in our culture in the West, kind of generally, in the English-speaking world, I think we're in desperate need of becoming more articulate and having people like Blind Boy. Blind Boy's a great lad. If you've had or are having or know someone who has, or even if you fucking have just a passing interest, and you should, in general well-being, emotional well-being, mental health, call it what you will. He's a very, very, very astute speaker on the subject. He's had his fair share of shit. He was diagnosed with autism within the last year or two. He's fucking my age, he's touching 40. So presumably this isn't something he's developed recently, it's a thing that he was born with. Again, I don't know the ins and outs of autism and whether it's genetic, or my understanding is that it can't be developed. Say it's not, you go to the doctor one day and boom, you get a diagnosis of fucking autism all of a sudden. I don't think that's the case at all. But so he's been struggling with being a round peg in a square hole his entire life. And I spoke about this recently as well in relation to my own dealings with what's called imposter syndrome. And one thing that I mentioned in relation to that was, it's great getting the labels sometimes. I'm not a massive fan of labels generally. I think for the most part they do more harm than good. Or maybe not for the most part, but they can certainly do more harm than good. But in relation to labeling what I was suffering from, which was imposter syndrome, that went a very long way in essentially curing my imposter syndrome. And I'm sure with Blind Boy's diagnosis, although I don't know the man, I've never spoken to him, so I'm kind of assuming this, but I would imagine getting the diagnosis and being able to put a name on why he mightn't have fit into culture or society or life generally, I'm sure that went a long way in helping him on his journey become, a fully fledged, fully unified fucking being on this planet, for want of better language. Again, I'd love to have better language when it comes to things like that. And again, it's something I've spoken about on the podcast endlessly. So the way I see human beings in their entirety, broad sweeping generalization, is that we're split in three. So there's the physical body, then there's the thinking mind, and then there's the more emotional side of us. And what I've said about the more emotional side of us is that it doesn't speak English. In fact, it doesn't speak any language. I suppose it's non-verbal. And that's why we struggle to articulate feelings. Now that's not to say that we can't, or at the very least that we can't get better at describing feelings and our emotional lives generally. But a classic example of this is when somebody's being interviewed after, I don't know, scoring the winning goal in the World Cup final or whatever it is, winning gold in the Olympics. The interviewer gets them and they're fucking in the moment and they go, how do you feel? And they're like, oh, fucking deadly. Great, the best moments of my life. But they're not really telling you how they feel per se. It's just they tell you they feel great. Like if you were to ask them, no, don't just tell me this is the best day of your life and that you feel fantastic. Tell me exactly how you're feeling. It's like, oh man, it's just like, it's fucking class. It's, oh wow, like. And again, like, tell me how much you love your kids. Oh, they're the best thing ever. They're my life, they're my everything. No, but go into a bit more detail there. Oh, they just, they're class. Words fail when it comes to kind of emotional bonds and anything in the emotional realm at all. Words reliably fail. So I think for our emotional lives, we've all the more reason to become that little bit more articulate. Because we kind of owe it to ourselves and we owe it to fucking everybody to put words to our feelings and to become more articulate generally, which is a big part of why I'm doing what I'm doing, this whole podcast thing, the whole Off the Lead thing, the whole 100 episode thing that I'm in the middle of now. It's all in an effort to become more articulate, to become more succinct and to get my point across that little bit better and to reach people and to give people a fucking dig out. And myself along the way, it's a steep learning curve and I'm really enjoying it. But getting back to what I started the fucking episode about, PJ Gallagher mentioned that he had spent I think it was 11 weeks he went in. But he said something that again really struck me. He said when he was in there, after, I think it was after a week or two, he had his reservations about going in. He doesn't want to kind of label himself, mental, for want of a better term, and all that jazz. But he didn't want to give himself all these labels. And I would imagine pretty much everybody who ends up entering that type of an institution doesn't fucking want to. They're there because they fucking have to be there. It's not a choice as such. You may have chosen to fucking go in there, but in the same sense that you choose to take your fucking chemo when you're diagnosed with fucking cancer. Yeah, it's a choice. You don't have to, but you kind of fucking have to. But what he said was he was only there, I think it was maybe 2 weeks, a short period of time. And from dreading going near the place, within 2 weeks, I think it was, he felt like it was the only place in the world he felt safe. Because, and again, forgive the terminology, but everybody else in there, the patients or the service users, as I think is the appropriate term, they're all mental. Again, forgive the language. But they're all mental, and you don't have the pressure of society because it's not, it's not normal, and it shouldn't fucking be normal. A mental institution shouldn't be normal. A mental institution wouldn't serve any purpose if it wasn't unusual, again, for want of a better term. But I just thought it was really fascinating, and it reminded me of something. It reminded me of what I suppose a safe space is supposed to be. I've given out about safe spaces before. I think they're kind of terrible ideas. To think that you would be in an institution like a university or a college or even a school, pretty much one of the safest places that you could imagine, and that you would need within that environment a safe space. To me, that just boggles the fucking mind. And I'm trying to imagine explaining a safe space to somebody in a fucking war zone or a third world country, or in a country whereby you had to fucking, forage or hunt for food. Like the very concept of a safe space would be utterly foreign to them. But a mental institution, again, for want of a better term, a psychiatric hospital, I suppose, is a better, more appropriate term. A psychiatric hospital That's what that is. It's a fucking safe space. But the people who need that are people who, can't function in society and who have presumably tried and are at risk of fucking harming themselves or even killing themselves if they can't get out of broader society. And they need a fucking safe space. They need somewhere to go where they can not be surrounded by the pressures of normality or society or culture or the world or whatever way you want to word it. And what that made me think of was, are safe spaces kind of red flags? I mean, if you're in a college or a university or a school or whatever as far as I'm aware, these are the only places that have safe spaces. I'm not familiar with them outside of education, really. But I wonder, should it be a red flag to the people in them and to the friends of the people who are going to them or especially frequenting them? I mean, if you're having a bad day and oh fuck, I just need to get out of here. I need